Hello, and welcome to Smeg and the Femmes, a podcast to discuss Red Dwarf from a different perspective. I'm Janamali, and today I'll be talking about Series 3, Episode 3, Polymorph, with the help of my guest, Sunnysideeggers. Hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, how did you get into the show?
You know, that's a good question. I've been trying to ponder the timeline of when and how exactly I came to watch Red Dwarf. It's kind of felt like it's always sort of been around. Definitely had to do a little bit of searching for it, as it wasn't broadcast on Canadian television quite so openly. I definitely was in high school, and I just remember it being so quotable. And then me and my little brother have a very similar sense of humor, so we both absolutely thought it was a hoot. Like, we just thought it was the best. We'd be quoting it back and forth, much to my parents' confusion, as they had absolutely no idea what we were talking about. But yeah, I can't pinpoint exactly how or when I got in. I was racking my brain thinking of the timeline, but it's been quite a while. I was definitely a teenager when I got into it.
Yeah, am I correct in thinking that you're Canadian but you live in the US? Is that right?
No, I'm a Canadian living in Canada, but I have an American partner.
Oh, right, I see. Yeah, no, sorry, I was just trying to, pin down what kind of cultural thing you're coming from, because obviously it's a British show. It must be kind of. I wonder, does Crichton's, out of interest, does Robert's Crichton sound Canadian to you at all?
I've actually gotten this question a few times. Yes and no. His accent, I do think I looked it up, and he said he was basing it off of like a Vancouver accent, which is where I'm from, actually. So I thought it was I was like, oh, sweet, we're getting represented. I don't think it sounds super Canadian, but it definitely doesn't sound fully British. So that's fair. It's like a compromise, I think.
He says, as in Robert, he said he was going for a Canadian accent, and he has since been informed by various people that it's not a Canadian accent, but it was his idea of a Canadian accent.
Yes, his interpretation of a future Canadian accent.
Yeah, and of course, as I said, the future setting makes sense. Because it could have evolved in 3 million years. The Canadian accent,
Of course,
it almost certainly
yeah.
would have done, actually, wouldn't it?
I would hope we language and accents evolve over 3 million years.
I would hope, yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to remember where we were. Oh yeah. I think we lost the bit where we were talking about the warning at the start, which is so we better do this again. I mean, it was it's very sort of amusing the way it sort of sets up. That it is this is going to be a sort of scary episode, but a scary episode for Red Dwarf, not a really scary episode, so to speak.
Yes. A scary Red Dwarf episode, which is a little different than a traditional scary sci-fi episode, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the like intense voiceover, the zoom in, we've got the pod floating out in space, and then, oh no, the zoom in on Red Dwarf, it's obviously coming for them. Of course it cuts to it transforming into all the little silly objects, which is not what you expect after such an intense opening, but it's very on brand for Red Dwarf. Ending with, of course, the little bunny.
It's more simultaneously funny, but also it does set up that it is a genuine threat to the crew, because it could literally turn into anything. So obviously it is a threat.
Yeah, it's not just a a traditional shape-shifting type being, which is quite often in sci-fi, will simply impersonate other people, which is how it infiltrates. But this could be quite literally anything. Objects are
Yeah,
not off
exactly.
bounds,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And its natural form is, well, gross. Let's be frank.
Yes, it's very sluggish and kind of is weird, but he makes, or it makes, funny little sounds, which are very kind of amusing, for how it looks. Like, ugh, and then it goes like, and you're like, what? That's supposed to be
By the way, it
scary?
makes weird chittering noises.
Yeah, just the strangest little sounds, and you're like, oh, okay, all right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's sort of simultaneously gross, and if it wasn't so gross, it would almost be cute. But it's too gross.
Yeah. It's a fine line, but it's definitely on the grosser side for sure.
Yep. Okay, so moving on to the first scene with one of our boys, where we find Lister creating what he calls a meal, but Cat calls an autopsy.
Yes, the autopsy meal.
I mean, it's cute and touching that he's gone to an effort to try and cook a special meal for himself and Kat, but of course he's doing it in a Lister way.
Very, very much a Lister way. That's a good way to put it, actually. Like, yeah, he's cooking around. He's got his recipe that he makes for his friends, which I think is sweet because I think he says he's made it for Peterson before, which obviously we know is one of his buds.
Yeah.
So it is kind of sweet that he's like, well, yeah, I remember I've made this for my friends before. So it's kind of just like a little unspoken way that, like, yes, Cat is his friend. I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah, it's
make you
cute.
this. Yeah, I'm gonna make you this meal. But yes, he does it in a very Lister way. And Cat just looks positively unamused the whole time. Very, very cat-like in the sense that he is silently judging, also verbally judging, but he's just looking at Lister and just I can't do it. You can
I mean,
see
I
it on
don't
his
blame you. I mean,
face.
I'm kind of getting a visual now of a literal cat sort of looking at you, and looking at the bowl you presented to them in a, how dare you present me with this kind of way?
Exactly. Yeah, Danny does a great job of that, of like he is a human cat. That's what he is. You could just see the like, you're gonna feed me this? Me? This? No.
To be honest, I can't blame you. I mean, I wouldn't eat that meal either.
No, the spice would probably kill me. I can't handle spice. And B, just the fact that it is an autopsy meal.
I know
Yeah,
it's a no on two different counts.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. Sorry. As we were saying, whilst we weren't recording, he's. I mean, I know he's sure that the cabinets were all being cleaned, but he doesn't specify who cleaned it, whether it's him, Crichton, or whoever.
Yeah, exactly. The who cleaned, sterilized, and all that is unknown, which like we've agreed, if it was Lister in charge of the cleaning of it, I wouldn't trust that either.
Yep, I mean, especially since when Crichton comes in, Lissa says to him, "Not now, Crichton. I'm cooking," which kind of implies that Crichton was not involved in the cleaning of the equipment. So I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe Lister just assumed it was all clean, when he got it from the medibay or whatever.
Yeah, he like opened up the crate and was like, "Oh, well, who would put this away dirty?" And I mean,
It must be
plenty of
clean.
people. I'm sure.
Anyway, it's a very funny scene. Oh, and by the way, we are partly indebted to the set designer Mel Bibby. Apparently, he was the one who had this idea. Look, Lister is a kind of person who would get sort of that who would get sort of who would use a cow syringe to squeeze lemon juice and so on. So he suggested that.
Yes.
And they wrote a scene around it.
I mean, it's great. It's a pretty iconic scene, I suppose. I mean, I don't know how widespread iconic, but it definitely one that sticks in my brain quite a lot, in terms of Red Dwarf. Just the silliness of it, but also the sweetness. I mean, he's trying to cook for his friends, so it's sweet.
I mean, I must admit, Polymorph has always been one of my favourite episodes. I enjoy it a lot.
It's really good. I mean, I love the whole show, but season 3 definitely has some pretty good episodes. I think they're definitely kind of hitting their stride at this point. Obviously, there's a big change in the set and costuming from the first two. Definitely, you can feel, there's not necessarily like revitalized, but there's definitely more energy. And obviously we got Robert now. He adds a whole other dynamic to the group. I think not necessarily something that was like missing, like the first 2 seasons are great. But his addition to the crew definitely adds an element that was maybe missing a little bit, but I don't know. I just love him.
Yeah. And of course, we have the introduction of Hattie as Holly, which I mean, I love Hattie. So, yeah.
Love Hattie.
Yeah,
yes,
I'm a big Hattie fan.
She's just so wonderful. Yeah, definitely a change in the season 3, but yeah, Polymorph overall definitely up there on the list of favorite episodes.
Yeah, it's a very sort of memorable sort of fan favorite episode, I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So moving on to where we find Rimmer watching his home movies. This is a very sort of simultaneously sad and amusing scene.
Very, very on brand for Rimmer. There's that moment of sadness and humor in the sadness, I suppose. At least the way it's definitely played off in the show is we're meant to laugh at this sad hologram man.
Yeah. I have to say, when we see, his brothers, bullying him, and the kid who, who's nearest the camera and, holds up the ants to it, he looks like a younger version of Mark Dexter, don't you think?
Yeah, actually, when I was rewatching in preparation for this, I was like, because I know he's the only one who's been portraying one of Rimmer's brothers. Mostly we've just heard of them or seen the photos, but he obviously had that brilliant portrayal. But yeah, I actually was like, okay, casting did pretty good. Obviously, they had absolutely no idea at this point that they were going to have him come in and be, but I was like, no, it works, most definitely.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's not Mark Dexter because if it was, we'd know, But,
for sure, yeah.
They did a good job, of casting Mark as someone who could plausibly be one of Rimmer's brothers.
Yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I find those home movies really interesting because, of course, obviously, it also sets up the premise of his mum for later. We see her reading the Good Schools Guide and looking, like a classic sort of prim middle class mum. And then when we actually meet her via the Polymorph, she's totally different.
Yeah. Yes, and Crichton and his fish line, his inability to not make fish-based references. It's pretty funny. Yeah, that little scene.
Yes, sorry, were you saying about Crichton putting his foot in it with the silly old trout?
Yes, with the trout.
Yeah. That is hilarious. The way Robert just goes, completely over the top with the guilt. Oh my God, how could I? How could I? How could I?
Yes, he's so sweet. I definitely in the beginning, Crichton is just he's so guilty about everything, and it's just sweet. I love Crichton so much. He's just oh sir. He's just so relatable, oddly too though, because yes, whenever you make a mistake and you panic and you just gotta I'll commit
Yeah, and of
suicide
course,
immediately,
again,
as he
it's
says
just
later
how
on.
he uses guilt and it's completely different, you know.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely probably amp up the guilt a little too because that's
Yeah, I think they're
something that
definitely
gets taken
exaggerating a little
away.
bit, you know. So the contrast
Yeah.
would be more marked later on. Yeah.
Hmm.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So I mean, Rimmer at this stage of the show is very sort of in denial about the way his family treated him. You know, he's like, oh yes, I was a butt of the occasional practical joke. You know, etc. etc. Later on in the
Yeah.
show, I think he kind of comes to more acknowledge, you know, that they were actively abusive towards him.
Yeah, it feels definitely like something that he probably like didn't really have an outside perspective on. Like he's never really had a lot of friends to be like, "Hey guy, this is kind of weird." So I guess you could say that, like Lister and Crichton and Kat, their perspectives on his family life possibly led to some self-reflection on the fact of, hey, my brothers were jerks and my mom was really awful to me and my dad wasn't great either. But
Yeah, I
yes,
mean,
he's just so like, well, they paid attention to me as they're tying him down and rubbing jam on him and ants and what have you.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a gradual process. I mean, I think it starts in Better Than Life, you know, when he tells um, Lister about what his family were like, you know, and then now in this episode, he seems to sort of slip back into denial. You know, I think he sort of goes back and forth, you know.
Yeah, definitely he kind of flip-flops back and forth on being like, "Oh, yes, my wonderful family," and "Oh my gosh, my family." Which is
Yeah, I
fair.
think
I
that's kind of
mean,
realistic because I mean, obviously it's hard, you know, it would be for anyone to, you know, to acknowledge, you know, their family were actually terrible, you know. I mean, that's difficult for anyone.
yeah, I mean, definitely relatable and I guess kind of humanizing too in a way, is it's a very normal reaction to anyone who's got, family that may or may not have been the best, and it's just an unfortunate, I guess, level of sadness is that it's not like Rimmer can ever really make things better with his family. They're long gone. He himself is a hologram. So I guess it's kind of also bittersweet and sad that even if he does come to that realization, I mean, obviously he meets up with one of his brothers later, but for the context of
Yeah.
this, he can't really change anything or make amends with his family or have any closure. So, oh, sad.
Yeah,
Sadness.
it's kind of the inherent sort of tragedy of the show, you know. I mean, because obviously the fact that they're 3 million years in the future means that none of them can get any closure with their with their families, you know. And but obviously,
Yeah,
especially River, yeah. Huh. I
yeah.
mean, of course, he does later meet a hologram version of Howard, but I mean, I don't think that really helps that much, to be honest.
No, I mean he seems very amused by it in typical Rimmer fashion, of getting a one up on his brother, but I don't think that's necessarily healthy healing or dealing with the trauma. But it's Rimmer. We can't expect him to change that much. Then he wouldn't be Rimmer.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's part of the nature of the show, you know. I mean, he can't change too much, or he would no longer be the antagonist, you know.
Hmm.
Lister's protagonist, so to speak, you know. He has to, you know, sort of irritate Lister and vice versa, or it's not funny, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh huh.
I do also really enjoy Rimmer. When he's explaining, he's talking about his mom to Crichton, and he makes reference to she just despised idiots. A shame, really. Otherwise, we would have got along fabulously. Which is sort of him admitting he's a little bit of an idiot. I feel like in that moment there was a sudden self awareness. I played off for laughs, but I remember listening to that yesterday. I said, "Oh, did you just imply you were an idiot, Rimmer?" Like, what?
Oh, he did really, didn't he? Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Personally, I don't think he is, but he clearly thinks he is, which is a shame.
Yeah. Yeah, just interesting little bits of depth that kind of get thrown in there. I mean, all up to interpretation, I'm sure, but it's just interesting. Sometimes you're like, ha, and then you're like, wait, did he just? And you kind of like reevaluate the thing in the context. You take out the laugh track and you go, huh, okay. That's kind of what I do enjoy about Red Dwarf too. Is there's like, of course, the funny haha moments. And then sometimes if you do, look deeper into the dialogue or the context of the scene, and you go, whoa, okay, that's actually quite emotional, or some, character development or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, you do, in between the laughs, you get moments like that, sort of character development. I mean, it doesn't always stick, admittedly. I mean, a lot of the time.
No. Continuity who?
Yeah.
But yeah.
They do all evolve to some extent. I mean, even Cat, I mean, by the end, by the time we get to the promised land, I mean, even he has changed.
Mm-hmm, yeah, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just want to, apologies, but I just want to briefly lower the tone a bit, because there's no denying that this episode has a lot of phallic imagery.
It most certainly does.
I mean, first we get the polymorph turning into a very sort of phallic-looking sausage, and then there's
yes.
the polymorph's feeder that it actually uses to feed on emotions, which is also very phallic. And
yes.
Then, of course, there is a shrinking boxer short scene.
That is quite the scene, indeed. Yeah, I mean, it's a something else. That's for sure.
Into it. It is literally in the episode. They literally decided to have a scene which made it look as though Crichton was having sex with Lister. I mean,
right? Like it was very blatant, very blatant. Not they weren't like hint hint. It was filmed. The angle that it was filmed, everything was definitely to imply that they were banging on the floor. And then of course Rimmer walking in, and just the length of the stare before he says anything. I have heard it was due to the fact that the studio audience was howling with laughter. As you can hear, there's definitely some laughter going on. So Chris had to pause before he could deliver his dialogue, but the choice of expression he had on his face was just it I have to take a moment. Oh my goodness, it's just a very weirdly sexual scene all around.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you say, the real world explanation was that Chris literally had to wait for the audience to stop laughing so that before he could deliver his line, But in the universe, what the hell is Rimmer thinking as he
there's no in-universe explanation for that pause, or the way he stares, or the like kind of like licking his lips almost kind of anticipation of his. It's great, and even if it's explained, I'm still happy with the idea that he was just getting an eyeful. He was just taking a moment, enjoying.
It's funny. It's very amusing, and frankly, given the next episode we're going to discuss, I mean, I have no compunction in reading slushy explanations into it, because these episodes are very slushy. There is no getting around it.
It's very true. Very true. You just can't get around it. It's there.
Right there in your face, I mean, we didn't write this. Rob and Doug wrote it.
Exactly. I had no say in how this played out, but I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, so of course the first of the crew to lose an emotion is Lister. He gets terrified and loses his fear, and Lister is it's interesting, He's so different to regular Lister, and it's amusing.
Yeah, definitely he's much different than the Lister we've come to know. I found it was kind of interesting to the sort of the way it was written and the way Craig played it and everything. Is that he's almost more like a very stereotypical sci-fi protagonist kind of character, where there's not a lot of depth. There's just a lot of we're gonna get out there and we're gonna just kick some butt. I don't know if that was sort of intentional. It was just sort of like
I
a
mean, it's
vibe I kind of got.
channeling Rambo or someone, isn't it?
Yeah, he's very, he's get out there and just doesn't matter if I die, I'm gonna, at least I'll take it down. It just felt like, I mean, maybe I should clarify, very more like an American sci-fi, very aggressive and we're not gonna ask questions or anything. We're just gonna go in there and kick some butt. I don't know if that was necessarily the intention. It's supposed to be funny, and it most definitely is. But I was kind of like, interesting. This would be a much different show if Lister had this attitude all the time, because generally
it would be a show I almost certainly would not watch.
Yeah, right. He's a lot. He's a lot to deal with.
I mean, it's funny as a gag in one episode, but macho stuff is a major turn off for me. So yeah.
They're not totally valid, but I was just like, I feel like there's almost a parody of something specific, and I can't quite place what exactly it is, but yeah, it's just definitely, it's funny, and it's also very like, oh my gosh, where's our sweet Lister? He's so aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's not usually how Lister is at all, but an interesting, obviously, portrayal of when you have your fear taken away, like what, you've got no fear now, so all right, let's go do it. Let's just get out there. And so, yeah, it's definitely an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very popular T-shirt, by the way. It had his line, "Let's get out there and trot it." It was one of those very popular Red Dwarf T-shirts.
We're so starved for Red Dwarf content and merch in North America to begin with. It's so sad.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair,
it's
not so available now, but back in the 90s, it was extremely.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, you can still get Red Dwarf T-shirts, but unfortunately, there was a few years ago they were doing them officially. GMP were doing official sort of merchandise, but then I guess it just didn't sell well enough because they closed the shop, so it's a shame.
So sad.
You can still get unofficial stuff, obviously, online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unofficial.
Okay, so there was one point which kind of occurred to me. It's odd. I've watched these episodes so many times that it never occurred to me before until I was watching it for the purpose of this podcast, which is they have a discussion, the others, once they've put Paul Lister to sleep. What are we going to do? And they decide to run away. Then the next scene is them going down to the cargo decks, apparently deliberately seeking out the polymorph.
Yeah, that seems to be in stark contrast to what they've just said. It's Red Dwarf. The continuity is not always brilliant.
Exactly, yes. Yeah.
You could think perhaps they had another conversation on the way to Starbug to run off of, well, maybe we shouldn't leave, or maybe they were trying to clear a path to make sure it's not there. But yes, it is definitely, now that you mention it, I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they were leaving. What are they doing? They're going after it down in the cargo bay.
Exactly. I mean, it did occur to me that you could, if you wanted an explanation, you could say, well, maybe they have to go through the cargo decks to get to Starbug, but that doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it doesn't feel right that you would have to go through the cargo decks to get to Starbug, really.
Yeah, it should have its own floor deck. I guess it's a deck. I don't know, the layout of Red Dwarf is also ever changing in how you get to places. But yeah, it's I guess they
It's
had a
odd. I
change of
mean, it's
heart.
just. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's one of those kind of things which doesn't make any sense once you think about it.
Yeah, once you think about it. If you don't think about it, it's just fine, which
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, one thing you could say is Cat has changed his outfit since the previous scene. I mean, that is one thing, one argument for they're getting ready to leave, but that still doesn't explain why they decide to go down to the cargo decks where the polymorph is quite likely to be lurking. I mean, it's that classic kind of horror movie thing. No, don't go in there, you idiot.
Exactly. Right. Don't go down that dark hallway alone. What are you doing? Yeah,
It's like
totally.
it's basically that thing where the characters have to do a stupid thing because if they don't, the horror thing won't work.
Exactly. It's like they have to, otherwise they won't get, attacked in the dark by the scary spooky thing, but you still want to tell them not to do it.
I guess the reason it's less notable in this is because it's a comedy show. We're kind of used to the characters doing stupid things, so it doesn't stand out.
Yes.
So.
Yes, we are used to them. Like the fact that they both Rimmer and Crichton neglect to recall that Cat generates heat, and they fire off the heat-seeking, and then are confused why they came back towards them. And then they have that moment where they both just look at Cat, and Cat's like, "Okay, bye," and he runs off. Like because it's so serious when they're going down the cargo deck. Like Rimmer's like weirdly intense, and the light is all dramatic, and it's
that scene,
da-da-da-da.
it starts very, very serious, and sort of, like it's a proper
Mhm.
sort of sci-fi drama, and then of course and then of course as soon as the things start chasing poor Cat around, it's comedy again.
Yeah, yeah. They're like, okay, we'll give you just a little bit, and there you go. There's the laughs. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So
way
of
he
course,
runs.
speaking of stupidity, I mean, obviously, Cat, as we expect, it doesn't occur to him that this beautiful woman who's just suddenly appeared out of nowhere
Oh my
might
gosh.
actually be the polymorph.
Yeah, he doesn't even hesitate. He's just like, "Hey pretty lady, come walk with me." And he's just all strutting around, all like, "Yeah, I'll save you. I'll protect you." Just there's no self-awareness there at all, which is very on brand for Cat, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, characteristic of Cat. I mean, especially at this stage of the show. Maybe, a few series down the line, he might have learnt to be suspicious, but I don't know. Come to think of it, because that still works. Actually, come to think of it, in Sirens, they pose as beautiful women who want to have sex with women, and
Hmm.
it works again. So
Yeah.
maybe it will always work
It's
with
just
Cat.
Cat.
Because
He just wants to believe.
he's a cat.
Yeah, he's just a cat. But you have to remember, he's just a cat. And that's what we love.
Exactly. Yeah. So of course then so we get Cat losing his vanity, and Crichton losing his guilt, and Rimmer losing his anger, and they're all very noticeably changed, obviously, to put it mildly.
Yes. Yes, we got Rimmer in his iconic "Give Quiche a Chance" shirt.
There's a chance.
Give Quiche a chance.
Oh, one thing I do want to bring up, again, sorry for lowering the tone, but it's not me lowering the tone, really, it's the episode lowering the tone.
Of course.
which is, the way the polymorph manages to get Rimmer angry is obviously by posing as Rimmer's mum and pretending to have had sex with Lister, and it's, why would that work? Is it just a sort of macho, how dare anyone have sex with my mum thing? But is it because it's Lister specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I I want to know why the alphabeti spaghetti makes him so mad specifically. That's the thing that sends him over the edge. I feel like there's a story there. There's something we're not being told, and I want to know, but also
Yeah,
it's just funny.
you could headcanon that maybe at some point during his childhood or adolescence, he sort of saw something he shouldn't have, and when I say that, I mean his mum having a liaison involving alphabeti spaghetti, possibly.
Yes, possibly. Does that imply that the polymorph has ability to read people's minds, to access memories? Is the polymorph way more terrifying than we ever expected? Because if it can shapeshift into whatever and access memories,
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's
it's
scary.
ambiguous how much the polymorph knows, but I mean, it certainly knows enough to know that impersonating Rimmer's mum is absolutely going to achieve its ends, and
Yes.
and thinking about it, I mean, why would he be this angry when in an earlier episode we get him casually referring to the father of one of his school friends, Porky Roebuck, was secretly having sex with his mum, and he just sort of casually throws it out. He's not angry about it at all. It's just, something he mentions in passing. So why would he
Yeah,
get so angry now, unless the reason he's so angry is because it's Lister in particular?
it must be for his anger, because yeah, he gets very angry. Even like Holly's like, cool it, Arn, like, come on, calm down, bud. No, don't do the thing. Holly's trying to like talk him down. But then later on too, he's like, yeah, my mom, she was off, you know doing her thing with men. All of, like, he again has a casualness about it later on. So it definitely, the way it's set up, is it Lister's the problem.
I mean, basically, yeah, I do think the reason that it works so spectacularly well to getting Rimmer angry is because it's Lister in particular. I don't think he would have been so angry if it had been anybody else, basically.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's definitely how it reads. Is it's fine. His mom can go have sleep with whoever she wants, but not Lister. Lister is where he draws the line.
Yeah, and personally, I think part of that is because part of that has a slashy explanation. Because if I can read slash into something, I will.
Of course, and you should, by all means.
Yeah. Also, I hate to bring this up, but I mean, it's kind of ambiguous. I mean, I really, really hope this did not happen, but it's kind of ambiguous whether Polymorph and Lister actually did have sex or not.
Yeah, they don't really say one way or the other. Lister doesn't say one way or the other. He's
Actually, yeah, Lister
strangely
does say, "Yeah,
silent
you
through
want to
the
make me do
whole.
it."
Yeah, he
I
doesn't
mean, of
really.
course, he could be saying that, because he doesn't care what River thinks, But the thing is, basically, Lister without his fear is a completely different person. He's a lot more likely to do something really stupid and reckless, like have sex with a random person who's appeared out of nowhere when he knows a polymorph is on the loose.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, they don't really take a stance one way or the other.
Yeah, I
If it
mean,
does happen or if it doesn't, or if it's just simply just riling up
they leave it
Rimmer to.
ambiguous. And I mean, to
Yeah.
be clear, I mean, I really, really hope not, obviously, but
it,
it could have happened, I'm afraid. It's
it
possible.
could, unfortunately, could have happened, yes. We will never know.
We'll never know.
Never know.
uh-huh. Okay, let me see. Yeah. So moving on to my favourite scene of this episode, which I call the facilitator scene.
Yes, the classic facilitator. Just see me as a facilitator.
River without his anger is hilarious, I have to say.
He really is. it's funny because there's like obviously it's still Rimmer. They look, but he's just so passive. He just wants. I just want to facilitate that or the David. Oh, that's a good idea, David. Thank you, David. Just hearing him call Lister David is so jarring. We're like, obviously that's
It
his
really is
first
mean.
name.
If Rimmer calls Lister David, there's something seriously wrong.
Right? It's just it's a small little detail, but definitely adds to these are not them. This isn't right. There's definitely something going on. Why is he calling him David? That's just weird. It's Lister or Dave. Even that's borderline. He's just Lister. I don't know.
Yeah, and then of course, Lister sarcastically calls him Arnold right back, and this is wrong.
Yeah.
This is wrong.
This is all wrong on so many levels. It's just wrong. Yeah, it's a great setup though to show four very different characters, and how like drastically different the dynamic is, because they've had these key emotions taken out of them.
I mean, it's interesting, that Cat losing his vanity transforms him into a hopeless drunk, poor thing.
I know he's so sad, and he just doesn't. He just wants to agree with whatever, and he has like, I don't got an opinion. Don't ask me. Whatever you said is great. I love that. Like he's just very different because the cat we know is obviously he's outspoken. He says what's on his mind. There's not a lot of filter there. So yeah, he's just so sad. I feel so bad for him.
Yeah, he's just so sweet and pathetic, poor little thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Cat's vanity is a fault, but I mean, obviously, given the choice, you're definitely gonna go for Cat with his vanity rather than without.
Most definitely, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Give him his vanity back. Just give it back. Just give it back.
Back. And of course,
I want him back.
Yeah. And of course, guilt-free Crichton is also interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I mean, obviously, I think they played up quite a bit of him being very guilty, but it is most certainly a big part of Crichton, and the interesting implication too is being that he's an android, and so now his guilt is he isn't forced to obey his programming of serving humans, and he just becomes very much like, yeah, so whatever. I don't have to listen to you, and it again very jarring. You're like, oh, there's a sweet Crichton. Why is he so mean? Why is he?
And of course, in the next episode, we're right back to sort of poor Crichton can't disobey orders, and Rimmer taking advantage of that.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like me some sassy, guilt-free Crichton. Again, just a little taste of it for the comedy's sake is funny, but yeah, he's just so whatever. I don't care if you die. Whatever.
Yeah, the way
nice.
he even uses the earlier scene with Rimmer's home movies against him. Oh look, it's Bonehead's mum, very prim, very proper, etc.
Yes. Yeah, he delivers some pretty sassy remarks, definitely, which is I think is also kind of funny too because there's been not quite so much yet, still fairly new, but certainly there's been times when you're just like, Crichton, come on, man. It's Rimmer. You need to, call him out. He's being dumb. So it's sort of a little, I feel good for Crichton that he gets to say some stuff that's probably on his mind. But
it's kind of refreshing, to hear him say, "Oh, screw you, Hadron Head," to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got some good lines this episode for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do love. Apparently, Chris had a hand in the writing of his sort of anger-free character. I mean, he came up with some stuff. I mean, and I do love the way he goes. suppose we hit it hard and hit it fast with a major, and I mean major leaflet campaign.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, the whole dialogue in that scene is so good. I had heard that it was a little bit ad-libbed. I don't know if it was on the day or if they made some changes, but
Um,
it
I think from what I did actually listen to the audio commentary. There's more than one on the Body Snatcher collection. Doug Naylor and Ed By do an audio commentary for this episode, and they said about this scene that Chris sort of came up with some stuff, but he and Rob, Doug says, did go away and write the actual scene, so it wasn't actually ad libbed, because they were a bit worried, if they started letting the boys ad lib all over the place, that it would be chaos.
fair, fair.
Right,
I mean, it was probably chaos already. They didn't need more chaos. But yeah, no,
exactly.
that makes
If you
sense.
let them
I'm
just
sure they
do
probably.
whatever they like, chaos would reign.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I that makes sense that they talked to Chris and Chris said, "Hey," and then they said, "Okay," and we wrote it that way. It's fair.
I mean, they that was something they did a lot. I mean, sort of. I mean, not sort of. Literally lift dialogue that people were saying, but they would observe the boys, when they weren't acting, and sort of notice their body language and things they said, and sort of if it was something they could develop into something for Lister and Rimmer and co, then they would do so.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and that's also just probably part of the whole charm of it too, is it feeling natural, it feeling, organic in the moment. And that's sort of a testament too to good writing, is you're not really thinking about the writing, you're just very invested in the moment, in the scene, in the dialogue. And definitely, listening to actor input is generally helpful for almost any show. Because, when actors are playing these characters for long enough, I mean, we're only on series 3, but obviously when you get a little bit more of a feel, or just generally how the actor's personality can be used to augment a scene and add something to it, yeah, you'd want to utilize the talents of everyone involved. It makes a good overall show, I think, if you're using everyone to their fullest potential.
Yeah, yeah. Now I come to think of it, I seem to remember. Yeah, it's also on one of the commentaries. I mean, the facilitator scene. It's a very sort of I think it was either Doug or possibly a guy who said something along the lines of, it's a good example of the actors being very sort of unselfish, sort of sort of letting a scene develop naturally and letting it's collaborating to sort of make the scene funnier, And he said, that because they weren't trained actors, they had a very sort of unselfish approach, and weren't sort of always, why isn't my part bigger? They were unselfish in that way. So that's probably why the scene works so well.
Yeah, definitely. You get the vibe of it is they're not vying for control of the scene. They're just letting it flow. And I think yeah,
Yeah,
that's why it works so well.
yeah. So the way the episode sort of wraps itself up, it's very neat actually. The way they all go back down to the cargo bay, in a complete in the state they're in. You think the polymorph is gonna just sort of take them out completely.
Yeah, you're like they're done for. These guys are gone. But
Except
it turns
um,
out
I'm actually going to quote Hattie on the commentary. Suddenly, out of nowhere, those I forget what they are. Those target things which were fired earlier from the bazookoid, and
yes.
the door opens and Hattie says on the commentary, "Oh, there's one you made earlier," or something to that effect. Of course,
Basically, yeah, it's a good payoff from a scene they set up earlier. Comes back to save the day.
It's a very, 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 very neat and satisfying ending. Except, of course, the very
Dun
end
dun
was a very
dun.
good twist. The twist with the second polymorph.
Yes. Which is great because, you've got that like, oh, they beat it. Okay, cool. And then dun dun dun, two contents two. There's another polymorph, and then they just leave it hanging in traditional Red Dwarf fashion. Of wait, it's
Yeah,
done.
of course,
What?
we never find out. I mean, obviously, since the crew are still around and their normal selves, we know that they must have beaten it somehow. But how?
Yes. Yeah. Right. You're like, how? Or maybe the other polymorph is just chilling on. I mean, Red Dwarf is huge. The scale of it
Could
is
be, yeah.
easy to forget. So it could just be maybe this is a smarter polymorph or a dumber polymorph, and
We should
thus.
say actually because I don't know whether you're aware, but in the sort of late 90s, remastered editions of the first three series were released, and basically what they did is they sort of polished up the effects, and changed some stuff. One of the things they did was they actually changed the ending of this episode.
Oh, changed the
Yeah,
ending.
basically what they did was they inserted a caption at the end explaining what happened to the second polymorph. I wish I
Ooh.
could say it was a good explanation, but it's not really. Not really, to be honest. um,
Oh.
Basically, what they say is the second polymorph, which was much less intelligent than the first, hid in Lister's clean sock drawer, where it died of old age many years later.
Oh my god. So he was a less intelligent polymorph.
I mean, it's a
All right.
mildly amusing joke, I guess, but I think the original ending works better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and they do have another polymorph episode in the future, which is
Well, I
like
mean,
an
really speaking, I guess
unofficial
they have two. I
sequel.
mean, if you count Emo Hawk as the second one, and then there's Can of Worms.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's actually way more polymorphs than
Yeah,
than just. But I mean, you could also. The implication is that they were experimenting on them, so I'm sure they had to make another batch. And if that didn't work, it's off into space it goes. So I mean, it makes a certain kind of sense.
yeah. I personally, I think it's an excellent premise. I mean, I'm glad that they reused it because I mean, why the hell shouldn't you reuse such an interesting premise?
Right? Yeah, it's definitely worth another episode. Such a interesting creature to bring to life. With such an interesting ability to like play into the story in multiple ways.
Yes, I definitely agree. Okay, we're sort of well. Obviously, we come to the end, but I did want before we wrap up, I did want to ask you how would you rate this episode, both on out of 10 for slashiness and also overall as an overall score out of 10?
All right, for slashiness, that is a good question. I mean, just for the shrinking boxer scene alone, that's pretty slashy. Um, the rest of the episode, I mean, there's little implications. Probably I'm gonna say like a 7, 6 or 7
Mhm.
for slash. Overall, definitely one of my favorites. I'd probably say like an 8 or a 9.
That's interesting that you rated it 7 out of 10 for slashiness because so have I.
Oh wow! Great minds think alike.
I promise,
I mean,
listeners, we don't consult beforehand. We came
yeah.
up with those ratings totally independently. The reason I've given it 7 out of 10 is the same reason as you, the shrinking boxer short scene. I mean, really, that is, sort of blatant in your face. You can't get away from it.
Yes, that one was not hidden in the subtext. That was text right there.
Definitely text. And
Definitely the text.
yeah, I've always this has always been one of my favourite episodes. I always enjoy it. So I'm going to give it 9.5 out of 10.
Ooh, 9. That's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm still holding back the tens until probably until well a little bit longer, But so I'm otherwise we might give it a 10. But I think I'm going to hold back until we get to certain other episodes.
Totally fair.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of this episode of Smeg and the Femmes. Thank you to Hologramet for technical help, and also thank you to my guest, Sunnysideeggers. I hope you enjoyed listening. If you'd like to give us feedback, you can do so on either Tumblr or Discord, on the posts where I've linked to this episode. You can also email us at smegandthefemmes@gmail.com. And the next episode we'll be covering is Body Swap. I hope you'll join us then. But for now, goodbye.